May 8, 1945, Springfield Armory, Massachusetts. Colonel René Studler's hands moved carefully over the curved steel barrel, his fingers tracing the violent splits radiating from the bend like fault lines in stressed metal. This is not battle damage. This is structural failure from the inside out. The weapon on his examination table was unlike anything in the American arsenal. A standard German Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifle, recognizable by its distinctive profile and 7.92 by 33 mm Kurz chambering, but with an addition that defied conventional firearms engineering. The barrel curved 30 degrees to the right, approximately 15 centimeters from the muzzle, then continued another 12 centimeters before terminating in a vented cone. Mounted above this impossible geometry sat a periscope assembly with mirror optics, allowing a shooter to aim around obstacles while remaining in cover. Wehrmacht documentation recovered with the weapon identified it as the Krummlauf Vorsatz J, the curved barrel attachment infantry version. Studler had spent 23 years evaluating military firearms. He had examined captured Japanese Nambu pistols, analyzed German MG-42 machine guns, tested British Sten guns. He understood the engineering compromises inherent in wartime weapon production. But this device represented something different. This was not a compromise. This was an attempt to violate the fundamental physics of ballistics. The barrel fractures told a story. Deep longitudinal cracks extended from the curved section backward toward the chamber. The rifling inside the bend had been partially obliterated by extreme heat and pressure. Most tellingly, the steel itself had deformed, not from external impact, but from internal forces the metallurgy simply could not contain. Studler noted these observations in his technical report, knowing that what he was documenting represented more than a failed weapon. This was evidence of desperation meeting physics, and physics winning decisively. The question was not whether the Krummlauf worked. The question was why German engineers built it, when they must have known what would happen after the first few magazines. The journey to this revelation had begun 14 months earlier, in March 1944, at the C.G. Haenel Waffen und Fahrradfabrik in Suhl, Germany. By early 1944, the Wehrmacht faced a tactical nightmare that no amount of traditional firepower could solve. In Stalingrad's ruins, German infantry had learned a brutal lesson. Urban warfare rewarded defenders who could attack from concealment while assailants exposed themselves at every corner and doorway. Soviet troops defending rubble-choked streets consistently inflicted disproportionate casualties by firing from positions German soldiers could not engage without stepping into the open. In Italy, similar dynamics played out in towns like Ortona and Cassino, where Allied forces turned every stone building into a fortress. The mathematics of urban combat were simple and unforgiving. Whoever exposed themselves first usually died first. Wilhelm Bauer, an engineer at the Haenel facility responsible for Sturmgewehr development, received specifications from Wehrmacht ordnance officials that outlined an unprecedented requirement. Infantry needed a weapon that could fire around corners, over barricades, and through firing ports without requiring the shooter to expose any part of their body. Additionally, Panzer crews needed a method to defend against infantry attacks, particularly Soviet tank hunter teams with magnetic mines and Molotov cocktails, without opening hatches or vision ports that made them vulnerable to small arms fire and grenades. The solution Bauer's team developed was mechanically straightforward and ballistically catastrophic. They fabricated curved barrel sections from high-grade steel, with rifling carefully machined to continue through the 30-degree bend. These attachments mounted to the standard MP44 threaded barrel using a reinforced collar. The infantry version, designated Vorsatz J, featured a periscope sight assembly with mirror optics that allowed the shooter to aim while remaining behind cover. The Panzer version, Vorsatz P, curved 45 degrees and incorporated a more robust construction, intended to withstand the confined space limitations of tank warfare, with a shorter overall length of 38 centimeters compared to the infantry model's 51 centimeters. Initial testing at the Kummersdorf Proving Ground in March 1944 demonstrated that the concept functioned exactly as designed, for approximately 160 rounds. Testers could engage targets around barriers while remaining completely protected. Accuracy at 35 meters, the maximum effective range, was acceptable for suppressive fire. The periscope optics, while crude, provided adequate target acquisition. Wehrmacht observers watching the demonstrations saw a revolutionary capability that could change urban warfare dynamics. Then, the barrels began to fail. After 160 rounds of sustained fire, inspectors observed visible heat stress in the curved sections. After 240 rounds, microscopic cracks appeared in the steel. After 300 rounds, the barrels warped measurably, affecting both accuracy and reliability. The periscope mirrors, subjected to muzzle blast from uncomfortably close proximity, cracked and became unusable after approximately 80 rounds of rapid fire. Most seriously, spent cartridge examination revealed that many bullets had fragmented inside the curved section, with jacket and core separating under centrifugal stress that exceeded 100,000 pounds per square inch. Despite these catastrophic failure modes, Wehrmacht ordnance approved limited production. Approximately 10,000 Krummlauf attachments were manufactured between March 1944 and April 1945, with production split between the Vorsatz J infantry variant and the Vorsatz P Panzer version. The decision to proceed with production, despite known terminal flaws, reflected the desperation permeating German military planning in late 1944. Revolutionary capability, even if short-lived, seemed preferable to conventional weapons that offered no solution to the tactical problems German forces faced in every theater. The Krummlauf entered combat service in the autumn of 1944, distributed to Panzer Grenadier divisions and armored units facing urban warfare conditions across both eastern and western fronts. They deployed to Budapest, where German and Hungarian forces fortified the city against the advancing Red Army. Grenadier units received Krummlauf-equipped MP44 rifles with instructions emphasizing their revolutionary capability and warnings about barrel life limitations. They deployed to the Rhineland, where Wehrmacht defenders prepared for the inevitable Allied crossing of Germany's western border. They deployed to besieged garrison forces in the Courland Pocket, where German troops cut off in Latvia fought a desperate holding action against overwhelming Soviet forces. In each location, the initial combat reports followed a consistent pattern. Soldiers praised the tactical advantage the curved barrel provided. A grenadier in Budapest's Castle district documented shooting Soviet infantry advancing through a bombed-out apartment building, firing from behind a stone wall while the periscope allowed him to track targets he never had to expose himself to see. A Panzer commander in the Herdkin Forest described using the Vorsatz P to engage American infantry attempting to attach explosives to his tank's exterior, firing through a ball mount without opening any hatches. Wehrmacht after-action reports from November and December 1944 consistently noted that the Krummlauf allowed German forces to inflict casualties from positions that traditional weapons could not utilize effectively. But every positive tactical report included a critical qualification. The weapon's operational lifespan measured in hundreds of rounds, not thousands. A standard MP-44 could fire 10,000 rounds before requiring significant maintenance. A Krummlauf attachment became unreliable after 300 rounds and dangerous after 500. For soldiers facing sustained urban combat, this limitation transformed a revolutionary weapon into an expensive liability. Allied forces encountering the Krummlauf initially struggled to understand what they were facing. American infantrymen clearing buildings in Aachen in October 1944 reported taking fire from positions where no German soldier was visible. Shots seemed to originate from around corners or through impossibly narrow firing flits. The curved barrel's ability to fire from complete concealment created momentary tactical confusion, exactly as German planners had hoped. But the advantage lasted only until Allied troops adjusted their tactics, and only as long as the Krummlauf barrels themselves survived. The pattern that emerged by early 1945 was clear. The Krummlauf provided a genuine tactical capability that existed nowhere else in any army's arsenal. But that capability evaporated after combat use measured in minutes rather than days. German soldiers carrying Krummlauf-equipped rifles also carried backup weapons because they knew with absolute certainty that the curved barrel would fail long before the battle ended. But by February 1945, the tactical picture in Budapest demonstrated exactly how the Krummlauf's fatal flaws manifested in sustained combat. February 11, 1945. The Buda Castle District, Budapest. Oberleutnant Karl Müller's Panzer Grenadier Company had been defending a city block of 19th-century apartment buildings for 6 days against Soviet infantry attacks that came in waves every 4 to 6 hours. His unit had received 12 Krummlauf Vorsatz J attachments on February 5th, distributed to the most experienced marksmen, with explicit instructions that the weapons should be reserved for situations where conventional firing positions were unavailable. The first engagement occurred at 07:15 on February 6th. Soviet infantry, advancing through the rubble of a collapsed building adjacent to Müller's position, attempted to flank German defensive positions by moving through what they believed was dead space, an alley blocked at its entrance by debris that prevented direct observation or fire from German-held windows. A grenadier equipped with the Krummlauf positioned himself behind the alley entrance's remaining wall, extended the curved barrel around the corner, and used the periscope to identify and engage Soviet soldiers advancing through what they thought was protected terrain. He fired 37 rounds in 3 bursts, hitting 5 enemy soldiers and causing the assault element to withdraw. The tactic worked flawlessly. By February 8th, that same weapon had fired approximately 210 rounds across multiple engagements. The soldier operating it reported unusual vibrations during firing and visible heat distortion around the curved section even after the barrel had cooled. By February 10th, after approximately 340 rounds total, the weapon jammed during combat. Examination revealed that the curved barrel section had warped sufficiently that cartridges were failing to extract reliably. The periscope mirror had cracked across its center, rendering the sight partially unusable. The soldier returned to his standard-issue Kar 98K rifle. Müller's after-action report, recovered by Soviet forces when Budapest fell on February 13th and later examined by American intelligence officers, documented the operational reality of all 12 Krummlauf attachments assigned to his company. Every single unit failed before reaching 400 rounds. The average operational lifespan was 273 rounds. Most failures involved barrel warping that caused extraction problems, though 3 units experienced catastrophic barrel splits that rendered the weapons dangerous to their operators. The periscope optics failed consistently around 80 to 120 rounds, well before the barrels became unusable. German soldiers developed dark humor about the Krummlauf's reliability. They called it the Wunderwaffe for dry magazines, the wonder weapon for 3 magazines. Standard MP44 magazines held 30 rounds. 3 magazines totaled 90 rounds. The nickname captured both the weapon's revolutionary capability and its absurdly brief operational window. When Colonel Studler examined captured Krummlauf specimens at Springfield Armory in May 1945, his technical analysis revealed the engineering impossibility that Wehrmacht ordnance officials had chosen to ignore. A bullet traveling through a 30-degree curve at 715 meters per second experienced centrifugal force exceeding 100,000 pounds per square inch against the outer wall of the curved barrel section. Standard 7.92 by 33 mm Kurz ammunition used a mild steel jacket over a lead core, designed for straight-line ballistics. The centrifugal force in the Krummlauf's curve generated temperatures and pressures that caused the jacket to separate from the core in a significant percentage of rounds. These fragmented bullets created additional stress on the rifling and barrel walls, accelerating the structural failure process. Studler compared the Krummlauf specifications to American weapons development philosophy. When U.S. ordnance evaluated novel weapons concepts, the reliability standard required 10,000 rounds minimum service life for rifles and 30,000 rounds for machine guns. Weapons that could not meet these standards did not enter production regardless of revolutionary capabilities they might offer. The Krummlauf's 300-round lifespan represented less than 3% of American minimum standards. The technical examination also revealed why German engineers had proceeded despite these known limitations. Metallurgical analysis showed that Haenel had manufactured the curved barrels from high-quality steel alloys with careful attention to maintaining rifling consistency through the bend. The periscope assemblies, while crude, demonstrated sophisticated optical engineering given wartime material shortages. This was not shoddy work. This was skilled engineers applying their expertise to requirements that exceeded what physics would permit. The Krummlauf failed not because it was poorly made, but because what it attempted was fundamentally impossible with any material technology available in 1944. Soviet weapons evaluators reached similar conclusions when examining Krummlauf specimens captured in Budapest and Berlin. The curved barrel rifle represented impressive mechanical engineering applied to a concept that ballistics principles could not sustain. One Soviet report noted that if the Krummlauf could have achieved even a 2,000-round service life, it would have warranted adoption despite its other limitations. But at 300 rounds, it was a demonstration piece, not a combat weapon. The tone that led to the Krummlauf's development originated in October 1943 during Wehrmacht's strategic planning sessions focused on defensive warfare doctrine. After Stalingrad's fall in February 1943 and the Kursk disaster in July 1943, German military leadership recognized that the strategic initiative had permanently shifted to Allied and Soviet forces. Future Wehrmacht operations would emphasize defensive warfare in urban terrain, where Germany could leverage fortified positions and interior lines of supply to inflict maximum casualties on attacking forces. This strategic pivot required weapons optimized for defensive combat in cities, towns, and fortified positions, rather than the mobile warfare that had characterized German operations from 1939 through 1942. Specific requirements issued to Haenel and other German armaments manufacturers in October 1943 demanded infantry weapons capable of engaging enemy forces from protected positions that conventional firearms could not utilize. The specifications called for the ability to fire around corners with 90-degree concealment, to engage targets below fortified positions without exposure, and to allow armored vehicle crews to defend against close infantry assault without opening hatches. Effective range requirements were modest, 30 to 50 meters, reflecting the close-quarters nature of urban combat. Accuracy standards permitted man-sized target engagement rather than precision fire. The critical requirement was complete shooter concealment during engagement. Wilhelm Bauer, who had worked on Sturmgewehr development since 1942, understood that these requirements presented fundamental physics problems. A bullet could not change direction without experiencing forces that would stress both the projectile and the barrel conveying it. The sharper the curve, the greater the forces involved. Bauer's team conducted initial calculations that predicted exactly what Colonel Studler would later document. Centrifugal forces inside a curved barrel would exceed material strength limitations of both standard ammunition and available barrel steel. The mathematics were brutally simple. To achieve a 30-degree deviation over the Krummlauf's 12-centimeter curved section, a 7.92 millimeter bullet traveling at 715 meters per second would experience lateral acceleration of approximately 6,800 times gravity. This generated pressures against the outer curve wall that approached the yield strength of hardened steel. Each bullet passing through the curve subjected the barrel to stress equivalent to firing proof loads, ammunition deliberately overcharged to test weapon strength limits. The Krummlauf essentially proof-tested itself with every shot. Bauer's team experimented with various curve angles, seeking a geometry that would balance tactical utility against mechanical survival. A 15-degree curve reduced stresses significantly, but provided insufficient angular deviation for the intended use cases. Soldiers still needed to expose portions of their bodies to utilize such a shallow curve. A 45-degree curve, tested for the Panzer version, increased tactical utility but accelerated barrel failure to approximately 120 rounds. The 30-degree compromise selected for the Vorsatz J infantry version represented the team's assessment of the maximum survivable curvature, though survivable still meant failure after a few hundred rounds. The decision to proceed with production despite known limitations reflected calculations about Germany's strategic situation in late 1943 and early 1944. Wehrmacht logistics officers projected that German forces would face sustained urban defensive combat throughout 1944 and beyond. In such scenarios, weapons that provided even temporary tactical advantages might influence local battle outcomes favorably. A rifle that worked brilliantly for 300 rounds before failing could still change the result of a building-to-building engagement. Given that Germany was losing the war through attrition across all theaters, any weapon that improved defensive combat efficiency, even briefly, warranted production. This logic also explains why approximately 10,000 Krummlauf attachments were manufactured despite their severe limitations. German war production in 1944 remained substantial despite Allied bombing. Producing 10,000 curved barrel attachments required modest resources compared to tanks, aircraft, or artillery. If even 10% of these weapons influenced tactical engagements favorably during their brief operational windows, the investment might prove worthwhile. Wehrmacht planning treated the Krummlauf as a consumable item, similar to ammunition, rather than a durable weapon. Issue it to troops facing urban combat, except that it would fail quickly, and replace it when possible. This represented a fundamental philosophical departure from German military tradition. Prior to 1944, German weapons development emphasized durability and sustained performance. The MG-42 machine gun could fire tens of thousands of rounds with minimal maintenance. The Kar-98K rifle served reliably through years of combat. The Krummlauf's acceptance, despite its 300-round lifespan, indicated how desperately Germany needed capabilities that conventional weapons could not provide, regardless of how briefly those capabilities lasted. The combat record of the Krummlauf between October 1944 and May 1945 documented the weapon's consistent pattern of brief tactical utility followed by mechanical failure. In Budapest, during the siege from December 1944 through February 1945, German and Hungarian forces defending the city employed approximately 140 Krummlauf attachments distributed among Panzer Grenadier and fortress infantry units. After-action reports compiled by Soviet intelligence officers from captured German documents recorded 37 separate engagements where the curved barrel rifle influenced tactical outcomes during the initial phase of combat. In a representative incident on January 18, 1945, German defenders used Krummlauf-equipped rifles to engage Soviet infantry attempting to advance through a narrow courtyard connecting two building complexes. The ability to fire from complete concealment allowed German forces to inflict 18 casualties before Soviet troops withdrew and called for artillery support. Similar incidents occurred throughout Budapest's siege. But the same documentation recorded weapon failure rates that rendered the Krummlauf operationally insignificant by February 1945. Of the 140 attachments deployed to Budapest, Soviet forces captured or recovered 73 units when the city fell on February 13th. Post-battle examination by Soviet armament specialists documented that 68 of the 73 captured Krummlaufs exhibited significant barrel damage, failed periscope optics, or both. Only 5 units remained in potentially serviceable condition, though none had fired fewer than 150 rounds based on barrel wear assessment. The weapons that survived combat did so primarily because they had not been used extensively. Wehrmacht forces defending the Rhineland in February and March 1945 experienced similar outcomes. The 9th Panzer Division defending approaches to the Rhine River near Wesel employed approximately 50 Krummlauf attachments for urban warfare in towns along the riverbank. Combat reports from February 24th through March 8th documented that 42 of the 50 units failed during combat operations. Soldiers reported to unit armorers that the curved barrels became unreliable after what they estimated as fewer than 10 magazines of sustained use. Given 30-round magazine capacity, this suggested failure after approximately 300 rounds, consistent with patterns observed in Budapest. The Panzer variant, Vorsatz P, saw limited but documented use in armored combat during the Battle of Berlin in April 1945. Soviet tank hunter teams, armed with Panzerfaust rockets and magnetic mines, represented a critical threat to immobilized or street-fighting German armor. The Vorsatz P's 45-degree curve theoretically allowed tank commanders to engage infantry approaching from angles that conventional hull or turret machine guns could not cover without exposing the vehicle to additional threats. Soviet after-action reports documented several instances where German tanks employed curved barrel rifles against infantry assault teams, inflicting casualties without opening hatches. But the Vorsatz P's more severe 45-degree curve accelerated failure rates beyond even the infantry version's poor performance. A Tiger II tank commander's report, recovered from Berlin's ruins, described using the Vorsatz P during fighting on April 24th. After firing approximately 90 rounds at Soviet infantry, the barrel warped so severely that spent cartridges would no longer extract. The commander noted that the weapon had become useless faster than the ammunition supply could justify its weight. The most ambitious Krummlauf deployment occurred during the final defense of the Reichstag in late April and early May 1945. SS troops defending the government district received approximately 30 Krummlauf attachments with orders to employ them in the building-to-building fighting that characterized Berlin's final battle. Soviet forces assaulting the Reichstag documented facing fire from positions where no German soldiers were visible, a tactical signature of curved barrel weapons. But the rapid tempo of urban combat in Berlin meant that even the Krummlauf's limited 300-round lifespan proved insufficient. Weapons that might have lasted through a single day of sustained engagement in earlier urban battles failed within hours in Berlin's apocalyptic final fighting. German attempts to mitigate the Krummlauf's failure modes proved unsuccessful. Haenel experimented with stronger steel alloys for barrel manufacture in late 1944, but metallurgical limitations imposed by Germany's deteriorating resource situation prevented significant improvements. The tone to extended curve angle would have extended barrel life, but defeated the weapon's tactical purpose. Reinforcing the curved section with external collars or sleeves increased weight without meaningfully increasing durability. The fundamental problem, bullets and barrels experiencing forces that exceeded material capabilities, admitted no practical solution with 1944 technology. By April 1945, Wehrmacht logistics officers ceased requesting additional Krummlauf production. Combat reports consistently indicated that the weapons provided minimal tactical advantage relative to their resource cost and logistical burden. Soldiers preferred reliable weapons of conventional design to revolutionary weapons that failed predictably and rapidly. The Krummlauf's production ended not through formal cancellation, but through informal abandonment, as German military leadership recognized that desperation had led them to deploy a weapon that impressed observers but disappointed soldiers. Approximately 10,000 Krummlauf attachments were manufactured between March 1944 and April 1945, divided between two primary variants and several experimental configurations. The Vorsatz J infantry version represented roughly 70% of production, approximately 7,000 units. This variant featured a 30-degree curve, 51-centimeter overall length, and weighed 2.3 kilograms. The periscope sight assembly added another 0.6 kilograms. The complete system, MP44 rifle plus Krummlauf attachment, weighed 6.8 kilograms loaded, compared to 4.6 kilograms for a standard MP44. Effective range decreased from the MP44's 300 meters to approximately 35 meters for the curved variant. Expected barrel life was officially listed as 300 rounds, though combat reports suggested most failures occurred between 200 and 400 rounds. The Vorsatz P Panzer version accounted for approximately 25% of production, roughly 2,500 units. This variant featured a 45-degree curve optimized for use from tank ball mounts and hull firing ports. Overall length was reduced to 38 centimeters to accommodate confined spaces inside armored vehicles. The more severe curve reduced effective range to approximately 25 meters and decreased expected barrel life to 120 rounds. The Vorsatz P lacked the infantry version's periscope sight assembly, as tank crews used existing vision devices for target acquisition. Remaining production, approximately 500 units, consisted of experimental variants, including a 90-degree version, intended for extreme concealment scenarios, and a version with a 40-degree curve designed for use by fortress troops firing from embrasures. None of these experimental variants entered significant service, as their failure modes proved even more severe than the standard versions. Post-war surveys attempting to establish Krummlauf loss rates faced challenges due to incomplete German records from late 1944 and 1945. Of the approximately 7,300 Vorsatz J infantry variants manufactured, Allied forces captured or recovered approximately 800 units during Germany's occupation. Soviet forces captured the majority, approximately 520 units, primarily from Budapest, Berlin, and Prague. American forces captured approximately 230 units from Western Front locations. British forces recovered approximately 50 units. These captured specimens represented weapons that had either not seen significant combat use or had failed before their operators could dispose of them during Germany's collapse. The remaining 6,900 Vorsatz J units, presumably failed during combat operations, were destroyed during Germany's final defensive battles, or were discarded by retreating troops who recognized their limited utility. German weapons philosophy provided stark contrast to the Krummlauf's design approach. When U.S. forces required improved urban warfare capabilities during the Battle of Manila in February and March 1945, ordnance officials emphasized weapons that enhanced existing reliable platforms rather than introducing revolutionary but fragile alternatives. Additional Thompson submachine guns were shipped to Pacific Theater units. M2 flamethrowers were provided to assault teams clearing fortified buildings. Standard M1 Garand rifles remained the primary infantry weapon throughout urban operations, with their 800-meter effective range and 10,000-round service life providing sustained firepower that tactical novelty could not replace. German soldiers who survived the war and participated in post-war interviews consistently described the Krummlauf as brilliant in concept, disappointing in practice. A Panzer Grenadier veteran interviewed by American historians in 1947 summarized the weapon's contradiction. When it worked, it was amazing. You could shoot men who couldn't shoot back. But it worked for maybe one battle, sometimes only a few hours. Then you needed a normal rifle again. We learned to carry both. The philosophical difference underlying American and German approaches was clear. German desperation in 1944 prioritized revolutionary capabilities that might influence individual engagements, even if those capabilities existed only temporarily. One approach won the war. The other produced impressive engineering failures. May 8, 1945. Springfield Armory, Massachusetts. Colonel René Studler completed his technical report on the Krummlauf curved barrel rifle, documenting findings that would inform American weapons development for decades. His conclusions were unambiguous. The Krummlauf represented sophisticated engineering applied to requirements that exceeded the physical capabilities of any material technology available during World War II. The weapon functioned exactly as designed for a brief operational window, then destroyed itself through the fundamental physics its design attempted to circumvent. This was not a failure of German engineering skill. The craftsmanship evident in captured specimens demonstrated considerable expertise. This was a failure of strategic judgment that prioritized revolutionary capability over sustainable performance. Studler's report influenced post-war American weapons development doctrine in subtle but significant ways. When designers proposed novel weapons concepts during the Cold War era, military procurement officials consistently demanded proof that revolutionary capability would not come at the cost of reliability and durability. The Krummlauf served as a cautionary example. Impressive demonstrations do not constitute successful weapon systems. Combat effectiveness requires sustained performance under field conditions, not brief periods of revolutionary capability between failures. The weapon that opened a small tactical window in urban combat, allowing soldiers to shoot around corners while remaining in complete concealment, closed that window through its own mechanical limitations faster than enemy action ever could. Approximately 10,000 Krummlauf attachments were manufactured, and perhaps 1,000 influenced combat outcomes before failing. The remaining 9,000 served primarily as evidence that desperation produces innovation detached from reality's constraints. The Krummlauf was not poorly designed. It was brilliantly designed to achieve specific tactical goals that Wehrmacht forces desperately needed in 1944 and 1945. Those goals simply could not be sustained by weapons technology available to German engineers, working within the physical laws governing bullets, barrels, and ballistics. And in that single fact lies the entire story of why Germany's late war wonder weapons, regardless of their revolutionary concepts, could not compensate for strategic defeats, resource exhaustion, and the mathematical reality that innovative weapons mean nothing if they destroy themselves before the battle ends. The curved barrel rifle that should have changed urban warfare instead became a museum curiosity and a lesson. You can bend steel, but you cannot bend physics. The bullets knew this truth, even if the desperate engineers did not.